This week, the government passed a law that it says will make you £29,000 richer by the time you retire. That's a big number, it's specific, and it was announced with the kind of confidence that implies it's already happened. The Pension Schemes Act 2026 received royal assent on the 29th of April. It covers the £2 trillion worth of pension savings sitting in UK workplace schemes. And according to the government, the average worker saving into a pension will see their retirement pot rise by up to £29,000 by the time they stop work. Over 20 million workers, £29,000 each. That's the claim. But here's what the coverage mostly missed. That £29,000 is not a payment. It's not a guarantee. It's a projection, built on a specific set of assumptions about who you are, how long you work, and whether the reforms deliver in a market that has never been reformed in this way before. This is Quo Watch. The act has passed. The question now is what the numbers actually mean. Let's look at the mechanism. Before you can evaluate the £29,000 figure, you need to understand what the Act actually changes, because most coverage describe the headline without explaining the mechanism. The UK's workplace pension system, the type most people have called defined contribution, is fragmented. There are hundreds of different schemes. Some are large and efficient, many are small, expensive to run, and historically underperforming. The Act addresses this fragmentation through three main levers. Lever 1. Megafunds. From 2030, multi-employer workplace pension schemes used for automatic enrolment must have at least £25 billion in assets under management in their main default fund. Or they lose their auto-enrolment status. The government's logic is that size creates efficiency. Larger funds can negotiate lower fees, access a wider range of investments, including private equity and infrastructure that smaller schemes can't reach, and deliver better returns. The model is explicitly borrowed from Australia and Canada, where pension megafunds have produced strong, long-run returns. The UK is late to this architecture. The implication for the market: most existing schemes are too small to qualify. Consolidation, whether voluntary or forced, will follow. The Pensions Regulator estimates the number of multi-employer defined contribution schemes will shrink significantly by 2030. Lever 2. Value for money. Every qualifying pension scheme will be required to demonstrate, using a standardized framework, that it is delivering value for money relative to comparable schemes. Schemes rated as not delivering value will be required to take remedial action. If they can't improve, their members will be transferred to a scheme that is delivering. This is significant. Currently, there is no legal requirement for a pension scheme to prove it performs. Schemes can charge relatively high fees and deliver below-average returns for years without any regulatory consequence. The value for money framework ends that. According to the Financial Conduct Authority, the dispersion in returns between the best and worst-performing default funds is large enough to translate into tens of thousands of pounds difference at retirement for an identical contribution history. The framework is designed to compress that dispersion. Lever 3. Small pot consolidation. The average UK worker now holds around 11 jobs over their career. Each time they move employer, they typically leave behind a small pension pot. According to data from the Pensions Policy Institute, there are already approximately 3.3 million lost or unclaimed pension pots in the UK, containing over £31 billion in savings. From 2030, dormant pots worth £1,000 or less will be automatically transferred to a consolidator scheme, without requiring the member to take any action. This removes the administration cost of running thousands of tiny, inactive pots, and in theory ensures the money is being invested efficiently rather than sitting idle. Those are the three levers. Megafunds drive scale and investment access. Value for money drives performance accountability. Small pot consolidation reduces fragmentation and waste. Together, the government says they produce £29,000. So now let's look at that number. The £29,000 figure comes from the government's own impact assessment published alongside the bill. It is real arithmetic, not invented, but arithmetic depends on its inputs, and the inputs for this number are worth understanding. The government describes the figure as applying to an average worker at the start of their career, by the time they retire. The calculation draws on published annual earnings averages. A full-time male earner at those average earnings could see up to £31,000 more. a woman at average full-time female earnings up to £26,000 more. The blended headline is £29,000. That decomposition matters. The £29,000 comes from three combined effects: lower fees passed through to members, higher investment returns from better performing and better diversified funds, and the compounding effect of money being invested more efficiently for longer, rather than sitting in dormant pots losing value to inflation. Each of those assumptions is defensible. None of them is guaranteed. Here are the questions the figure requires you to answer yes to before it applies to you. Question 1. Are you starting your career now? The £29,000 is modelled on a worker at the start of their career, someone who will spend 40-plus years benefiting from the full effect of the reforms as they compound. The longer you've already been working, the smaller the applicable gain. The data does not yet confirm exactly how the benefit tapers for mid-career workers, but the structural logic is clear. 40 years of compounding is worth more than 20. Question 2. Is your current scheme underperforming? The gains from consolidation and the value for money framework flow primarily to people in currently underperforming schemes. If you are already in a large, well-run scheme, the kind that exists at major employers or in the best master trusts, much of the improvement may already be priced in. The Pensions Policy Institute has noted that the reform's benefits will be uneven. Workers in smaller, higher-cost schemes with fragmented pots stand to gain the most. Workers already in high-performing schemes may see more modest improvements. Question 3. Do the megafunds actually outperform? The Australian and Canadian megafund model has produced strong long-run returns. The OECD's Pension Outlook data supports the premise that scale allows for investment in private assets, infrastructure, private equity, private credit that generate higher returns over long time horizons than listed equities alone. But the UK is not Australia. The Australian superannuation system has had decades to build its megafund infrastructure, its pipeline of private assets, and its governance culture. The UK is starting that process now, with a 2030 deadline for schemes to reach the £25 billion threshold. The Pensions Management Institute has noted that the ambition is large and the timescales relatively short. There are genuine risks: implementation complexity, limited domestic private asset pipeline, and the sheer industry bandwidth required to consolidate hundreds of schemes simultaneously. Question 4. Does the mandate power get used, and what happens if it does? The most contested part of the Act during its parliamentary passage was a reserve power. It allows the government to mandate that pension schemes invest a specified proportion of their assets in productive assets, including UK productive assets. This power was the subject of a marathon of back and forth between the Commons and the Lords before a compromise was reached. The concern raised explicitly in the Lords was that it potentially conflicts with the fiduciary duty of pension trustees, whose legal obligation is to act in the best financial interests of their members, not in the interests of UK economic policy. The government's position is that the power is a backstop and will not be exercised if the market moves voluntarily. The Mansion House Accord, a commitment signed by major schemes last year, sets targets for private asset allocation. If those targets are met, the mandate power stays dormant. But the data does not yet confirm how the UK will produce enough high-quality private asset investment opportunities to absorb the capital that will flow from consolidated megafunds at pace. The incentive structure strongly suggests that if the pipeline of domestic assets is thin, returns from the private allocation could disappoint relative to the model. This is not a reason to dismiss the reforms. It is a reason to understand what the £29,000 requires to materialise and to watch whether the conditions are being met. So what does this mean for your pension right now in practical terms? The Act is a framework. Most of it isn't in force yet. Royal assent is not the same as implementation. The Pension Schemes Act 2026 is substantially a framework. It creates the powers and the architecture. Almost everything material requires secondary legislation, consultation, and regulatory guidance to become operational. The value for money framework won't produce its first assessments until 2028. The megafund requirement doesn't bite until 2030. Small pot consolidation won't begin until after 2030. The £29,000 is a projection across a working lifetime that begins now, from a system that will take the rest of this decade to build. That is not a criticism. Structural reform takes time. But it does mean the number should be read as a direction of travel, not a confirmed outcome. Your biggest lever is contribution rate, not reform. Even with the full effect of this act realized, the most powerful variable in your retirement outcome remains your contribution rate. The auto-enrollment minimum is 8% of qualifying earnings, 5% from you, 3% from your employer. Most financial planners consider that insufficient for a moderate retirement income. The Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association's retirement living standards suggest a moderate retirement for a single person requires approximately £31,700 a year. The full new state pension in 2026 to 2027 is £12,548 a year. The gap, approximately £19,000 a year, requires a private pension pot of around £439,000 at current annuity rates, according to analysis by Standard Life using those benchmarks. The average defined contribution pension pot at retirement is currently around £37,000. A figure dragged down heavily by the millions of small dormant pots, the Act is designed to consolidate. That is not a rounding error. That is the scale of the gap between where most people are and where they need to be. The Pension Schemes Act addresses the efficiency of the system. It does not address the insufficiency of the contribution rate. That conversation, whether auto-enrollment minimums need to rise, is being examined by the forthcoming Pensions Commission. The gender pension gap is not addressed by this Act. The government's own impact assessment acknowledges the gap in its own projections. A male average earner gains up to £31,000. A female average earner gains up to £26,000. That £5,000 difference reflects the structural reality that women have lower average lifetime pension contributions from career breaks, part-time work, and the gender pay gap. Those structural causes are not addressed by megafunds or value-for-money frameworks. The efficiency gains apply equally, but they compound on a smaller base. The Act is an improvement. It is not a solution to the gender pension gap. The Pension Schemes Act 2026 is the most significant reform to UK workplace pensions since auto-enrollment. The direction is right. Fragmentation is a real cost to savers. Underperforming schemes are a real problem. The megafund model has international evidence behind it. The £29,000 figure is not invented. It is real arithmetic based on real assumptions. But it requires a full career of benefit, a currently underperforming scheme, successful megafund implementation by 2030, a domestic private asset pipeline that doesn't yet exist at scale, and a fiduciary framework that the Lords tried to amend and the government resisted. You were told this was a £29,000 boost for over 20 million workers. That claim is not false. It is conditional. The conditions are worth tracking. The Pensions Commission will be where the next layer is debated. That is where contribution rates, the variable that matters most to your actual pot, will be examined. Now you know the cause. If you want to go deeper, how auto-enrollment was designed and why the minimum contribution rate was set where it was, what the Australian superannuation system actually does differently, or how the government's fiduciary duty compromise works in practice, let us know in the comments. Sources are in the description. Every claim has at least 2 of them. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, subscribe to support the channel and see more.